Hi there, Adam Gower here, and welcome to the Real Estate Crowdfunding Show syndication in the digital age at gowercrowd.com, where today it is my great pleasure to introduce you to, if you don't already know him, Scott Royal Smith of Royal Legal Solutions. Now, Scott is a real estate attorney specializing in real estate investor protection. So, I hear you cry, what on earth is he doing on a podcast about digital marketing for developers wanting to raise capital online? Well, let's put it this way. When you get to his website, the first thing you're going to see is a killer tagline and subheading, a bright red button calling for action with an intriguing free giveaway, a video, a download, and a bunch of other stuff. This guy is a digital marketing machine. And you're going to hear from him today how seeing the world of online marketing need be nothing more than an extension actually of your own personality and style. Put another way, by going with what makes sense to you and having fun doing it, you can build yourself a very solid online presence. You'll find a link to Scott's website on the podcast page for today's episode at gowercrowd.com. Now, for all you real estate investors out there, while you're there on the podcast page, sign up for the amazing webcast Real Estate Investment Contracts, Reading Between the Lines, that I actually put together for you with Scott that will guide you through the key things to look for in an investment contract. In it, you're going to learn what Scott looks for in offering documents on any deal before he invests. The webcast is totally free. It's one of the most advanced that I've put together so far, so buckle your seatbelts and you can get access to it on the podcast page for today's episode at gowercrowd.com. Here's what you're going to be learning about in today's episode: how to attract investors by giving stuff away, why you should share your business secrets without being worried about your competition, and that engaging your investors with the hardest subjects first is the best way to build a relationship with them. And of course, you're going to learn a whole lot more than just that. So be sure to go to the podcast page for today's episode at gowercrowd.com and sign up for the Real Estate Investment Contracts Reading Between the Lines webcast. You will not regret it. Now, here is every real estate investor's best friend, attorney Scott Royal Smith. Scott, what a pleasure to see you.
Yeah, awesome to be here with you, Adam.
We've done some work together before with that amazing course that we did. And that will be available on the show notes page for today's episode. So we'll definitely get that out in front of everyone. But what I'm interested in hearing from you today is about your digital marketing. I mean, you're the only, as far as I know, you're the only attorney, let alone real estate attorney, that's really making an effort. So tell me something about why you even started to do that. I mean, a bit of your background as to how you came to decide to do digital marketing at all.
Yeah, well, it probably just takes a bit of a story here on, how does this even come to pass, right? And it really all started back when I was in law school, and I bought my first piece of real estate. It was an active transmission on an auto repair shop that I bought my second year of law school. I bought the building and the business and flipped both of them at the end of law school to graduate without debt. And I'd always continued to invest in real estate after the fact. And now I'm an attorney who helps clients all across the country in every asset class, exclusively in the fields of real estate. And one of the things that I found out in my journey of, being a litigator, suing insurance companies for not paying out claims, because that's their business really, right? Is they collect premiums and deny coverage. Right. And is looking into that as saying, I struggled as a real estate investor trying to figure out all of the pieces that goes into like what it takes to actually be a good real estate investor. I mean, from the entity structuring to insurance to banking to accounting, all of the back end pieces. I would come in from law school, you would think that like, oh, all that stuff is going to be easy for you. It's not. It takes a lot of effort to get it up to speed. And the first struggle I had was really looking at, how many people can I help? I've done all of this information. I built it for myself. It's amazing. The people that are around here in Austin that I was meeting at meetup groups and other ways I was trying to help people. they were really excited about they're like, oh, this is the best thing I've ever even heard about. I didn't even know this was even possible to hold assets anonymously and use series LLCs to compartmentalize everything and how it can stay super simple and all that. That I talk about on the hundreds of podcasts and thousands of articles I write, right? But this is where like it came into it, saying like, how do I help more people? And the only way that I could find to help more people was to get on bigger stages, right? And podcasting was really the forefront of that. To be able to say, well, what if attorneys really operated and in the realm of saying, well, let's actually figure out ways to help people's lives holistically, not just in the one narrow legal aspect, but everything from start to finish. Let's do it all underneath one roof. And then let's get onto shows and podcasts and give away all of the secrets. Tell people exactly how to do it, how they could do it for themselves, how everything works together. There's a couple of people that I think listen to my shows that try to put it all together for themselves and that want to. And I say, that's awesome. Go out there, do it for yourself if that's your love and passion. For the majority of people, what they really are looking for is the peace of mind, knowing that somebody really does know what they're talking about. And they know it because they heard it and it made sense. And it wasn't just like high pie in the sky, like, let me tell you about features and benefits. I was like, no, this is the nitty gritty of how it all works. You could totally rip off my system from what I'm telling you about and how everything goes with it. And come to find out, people will trust you even more and are more likely to buy from you when you just give it all away.
That's extremely interesting. In fact, one of the words that you used was to give away your secrets. Now that's very interesting because in the real estate world, as you well know, every developer thinks that they've got a secret sauce, right? It's like nobody else knows. It's original thought, right? Everyone thinks they've got that, but really it isn't. So tell me something about what that means to broadcast your quote secrets. What does that mean exactly? And why is it important?
Well, the first thing you have to have is a secret, right? But come to find out that not all secrets are really all that secret. Usually it's just something that people know about, but nobody's talking about yet, right? So for what that was for us is the use of a series LLC. So the series LLC, been around for over 20 years, extremely strong structure, allows you to essentially create one entity, one bank account, one tax return, but you get to create LLCs on your desktop for free. And you can use them anywhere in the country. So I was like, holy smokes, there's nobody out there that's really picking this up and showing real estate investors how they can be using a series LLC. This is a quote unquote secret that people need to know about, right? Now, when you go into that realm of sharing something that's like that and you're new into it, you're going to find people that are going to try to shoot you down, right? And that's just part of the process of learning. You got to know your stuff inside and out, especially as an attorney. You can't be wrong, right, into it. You got to know it. So your secret's got to be bulletproof. And then the piece of it is you just start talking to people about all of the normal objections that you've heard of, and you address those directly and head on, and then you leave it to the audience to make the decision. I think that what's really important is that we have really fair conversations about things, right? So for the series LLC, for example, one of the major objections is like, well, there's no case law on it, right? So how do we know it's going to be true? And so that's a really good point. Like, how would you know that this is really safe? And the other side of the conversation of that is to talk about saying, well, what is the law? Well, the law is actually what gets passed by the legislature. How do cases get invented? Well, cases only come into existence because people challenge unclear laws. So if you have a clear law, there's nothing there to challenge. You're not going to find cases on this stuff, and it's already been around for 20 years, right? But through that conversation from both sides of it, and without having to get into, with just like a pure analysis, right? And then trusting the audience to be able to digest that information and make an informed decision on it, is a much healthier way of having a conversation, right? And when you can share the secrets and talk about it intelligently and help the audience process through why you would want to think a certain way through a problem, that's how you really win the trust. because you're not just telling them like that's somebody's point of view, my point of view is X. You're saying, no, there's actually a way to analyze this information, and then you can make your own decision on it. I think you're going to agree with my way of thinking about it because I've spent a lot of time thinking about how to properly analyze this. And I think that's something that we actually looked at on our show the other way, Adam, when you were showing me how you looked at different deals about like, how would I know what my best and worst case scenarios would be? And I was like, man, this is amazing because you were showing the analysis and the thought process that goes behind why would you want to analyze it a certain way.
Right. And this speaks to this concept of addressing objections head on. So tell me a little bit more about what you mean by that. And why is it important? Why don't you start with legal, real estate law 101? You say you start with the objections head on. By the way, this is something that I always advise my clients. The first thing you want to be writing about is the first thing you want to be talking about is that which investors are going to be most concerned about. Start with the hardest things first, because if you don't, it's what's going to be in the back of their minds, no matter what else you say to them. So how do you relate to dealing with the objections head on? What's your interpretation of that?
Yeah. So I think the way that I've done it, so with use of the series LLC, right, it's actually so much better than the alternatives that I first usually have to tell people that. Be like, listen, I got this thing. It is so much better in every way, right, from what you're doing right now. It's going to cost you nothing more. It's going to scale infinitely for free. We can structure with anonymity in place. None of your operations are going to get complicated, more complicated than they are right now. Your taxes are going to stay the exact same. It's like, it's too good to be true, right? And when you're coming up with solutions for people, especially ones in a legal field that are technical solutions, I think you first need to tell them that, hey, I got this amazing solution for you, because that's how they actually capture the attention. Because I got to know, like, why in the world do I even care about listening to this, right? And then the second step is says, if it's really so good, why haven't I heard about it before, right? And that's usually your first objection that people come into that you need to address, right? So I'll talk about, hey, I'm a real estate investor myself. I've been doing this for over 8 years. I'm solely focused on real estate investors. There's just not many attorneys that are also in the same business you're in that only help people in this vein and do it on a national scale. And by the way, here's all of my credentials, right? And then they'll be like, well, I've heard other things that tell me about why your product, say call it a series LLC, right? We're calling it a product for this. Why your product's actually not so great. And I read on this website and this website and this website. And I'll go ahead and I'll usually address those just right inside of the way that I'm speaking, right? To say like, hey, this is what I've heard about it that's been critical of this, and this is my thinking on it, and this is why, right? And then so people can see it directly from the event. Like they see, here's the benefits I'm expecting. Here's why I've never heard of this amazing solution before. Here's all the reasons that other people are going to tell me why I might not want this thing. And do I agree with Scott's analysis about why those objections don't make sense, or how can I think about it better from Scott, right? And then I leave it to them as an open-ended. If you want to know more, here's the way that you find out more about it. Or here's the way that we can show you how this could work for you, right? And how we can have a deeper conversation about it. And I know that like after those, walking them through those 4 steps, what I'm really trying to do is actually just get them to be able to think better through the problem, right? I'm not actually trying to sell anybody or pitch them on like, you need to buy this now and this is the most amazing thing that's going to change your life. I'm like, no, just let me educate you, because I'm a natural born educator, right? But to me, the marketing and the way that we talk about this stuff, what makes really good marketing is a way that I can educate you as a potential customer or lead in a way that you actually care about and that you want to stay engaged with the content, right? So it's actually, in a lot of ways, the most powerful form of education would also, in my mind, be the most powerful form of marketing, because it's how can I continually educate you, get you to think better, look at things in a different, new way that's going to be able to help your life better, so you don't just tune out and go watch YouTube or Netflix or something.
Exactly.
Like
look it up on YouTube. Exactly. Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So that is,
YouTube turns into be like not that great of a resource a lot of times too, right? Because you end up going through the wrong search criteria. People will search for a particular thing. How does a series LLC work, right? Well, that's like asking how your car engine works, but you don't really care about your car engine, right? You really care about like, how do I get from point A to point B in a car? And to that, you need a much different kind of discussion.
But there's also by educating your prospects, for want of a better term, you are also establishing a relationship, right? So you're building a relationship of trust with those prospects that are out there, right? And they come to see you as an authority in the field, and that if they do hear it somewhere else, there's still this inclination to defer to the authority in the field. So let me ask you this. When you first decided to take your message from the in-person meetup groups, right, locally where you are, take it online, what were the first things that you did to migrate from in-person to the digital realm? And then how did that evolve to where you are now, and what are you doing now? So start with what you started with.
Yeah. I wish I could probably be more helpful in this particular category of it. Unfortunately, it actually comes really natural for me. And so what I found in my life and what I found in interviewing and talking to other people is that when people are naturals at stuff, it's almost worthless to talk to them. But really the best people to talk to are the ones that really struggled really hard because they had to figure out like a system for how to do it. But I'll explain it in just a context of what my experience was like in case anybody else wants to learn from that. And it was really simple. All I did was, my first podcast was actually on biggerpockets.com. I think it was podcast 109. And what I did is I wrote some articles for them. And it's like, hey, here's some stuff I know about asset protection for real estate investors. Check out my articles. I think they're great. And I published them through their blog, right? They were like, wow, this is really good content. Can you come up with a top 10 list of top 10 strategies people should know? I was like, no problem. So that took me about 30 minutes. I talked to them for about another 15 minutes in a pre-interview, and then we just shot the show. And it was in shooting the show. I mean, I have a lifetime experience of doing stage theater. So being in a performance aspect in podcasts feels really natural for me. And to just get on there and talk to people about it, as well as being in debate, and also being an attorney, right? So like critical thinking, public speaking, performance, all of these like natural skills that I had built over my lifetime happen to work really well in podcasting. And so I'd probably say, like, as an advice for that is to look for, what are the skill sets that, somebody spent like their life developing and honing in on, and then use that as their marketing channel. Because probably that's going to be the thing that they're able to do and win at the easiest.
Well, what I remember seeing, and you and I have known each other for quite a while now, what I remember seeing come out of your office were some really good blog posts, some articles, and then you started doing your own podcast. Maybe I just got onto this later, but you started with articles as well, right? You started doing a blog online. How did you decide what you were going to write about? I mean, we've talked about things addressing objections head on, but was there an actual process? Did you sit down and sketch out a list of articles that you were going to write about over a period of time? Or how did you do that?
I wish, Adam, that I had your level of planning and detail as one of my core skill sets. I don't. I live very much in a moment-to-moment type of existence, right? So you'd find me finding out, it's like, where did you get that idea from to write that article? It's like, oh, because I talked to a lead or a client that had this new type of issue that I hadn't dealt with before. I troubleshot it, and then I wrote an article about it. And then what I would do when I got that issue again is I would just direct people to the article instead of having to redo that conversation. So for me, it's always worked as like sales and marketing always have to work together. What you really got to do is you got to get in front of your people, that whoever it is that you're trying to help, and continually try to find out what are the more problems that they're running into. What ways can you make their life better? You have those conversations with them, which gives you the topics to write about. You do the research to be able to help that customer or client, and then you turn that into an article or a podcast or something else that you redirect for any future conversations, so you never have to go and like repeat yourself inside of like a whole nother atmosphere. At least that's the dream, right? But that's how I kind of naturally, organically built what the base of info is that I wanted to share with people.
Yeah, that is fascinating because, for people that really do struggle to think about what it is that I'm going to be writing, right? Where do I start, right? I've got no blogs. What's the first thing I need to write about? What I like to say is that you're basically going online is no different from being in person. All you're doing really is memorializing or digitizing what it is that you say to investors when you meet them. And you've just said that, right? So you'll sit down with somebody, they'll ask you a question, you'll answer that question, right? It's an interesting question. It's clearly something that if this person wants to know the answer to it, then undoubtedly other people will as well, and then repurpose that into an article that you put out online. So the way that I do it, just incidentally, one of the ways is I ask clients, what are your FAQs, right? Just write down the most frequently asked questions that you've been answering for the last 20 years. Every single time they ask the same question. That's a great place to start, right? With those questions. And then do you write them yourself, do you?
I'll write some of them myself. Some of them I'll use to a team. Anything that gets really technical and legal, I'll end up writing myself, because then we have to be really careful with the language that we use, because, you know, now we're getting into a field where other attorneys are going to be referencing the material. And then it has to be exactly right, you know? But for most concepts that we come across, what will happen is I'll have a conversation with somebody. I'll then sketch out an outline of here's the topics and the analysis, and then I'll have a content writer that'll come in and actually write it. So that way I'm always just staying at the highest level of providing the structure and the key pieces of content. And I would say that you can find content writers. I have a great one. I probably overpay for how much I pay for my content writer, really, right? But she just does like amazing work for me. But you can find people that can write content for you as long as you give them, like, here's the structure I want, and here's what the key pieces of information need to be in there, and be okay with the fact that it's going to be about 90% of the way you like it.
Right. And then you jump in and do some fine tuning with the editing at the end, right?
Sure.
And then put it out there. So now and then you evolved to doing your own podcast. That's something relatively new, right? Tell me about that process and why you chose to do that. Why you like the idea of podcasts.
Well, podcasts are great because it gives you a way to actually have a real conversation with people, right? And in a way that you might not otherwise be able to interact with them, right? So I chose a podcast and built mine, Real Estate Nerds. I don't think it's actually a moneymaker for us at all. You know, as far as I can tell, we don't really track it all that well of how all that works. But I like it, and I will continue actually probably to launch more podcasts here in the next year around marketing and sales and other things that I've learned about, because it's the way to share the info in a way that I think is easy for people to digest, right? So I think podcasts that really do it wrong are ones that really talk about a lot of technical stuff, because like podcasting and people talking is geared for storytelling. It's not geared for the conveyance of technical information, right? Technical information should be like in outlines and spreadsheets, because then I can actually look at it for long periods of time with really minute details of trying to assimilate something, right? The power of podcasting is really the power of being able to tell a story that conveys a truth that if you just told them the truth wouldn't be impactful, right? So if you can actually tell people a story that conveys a deeper truth about what's happening, people pick that stuff up. We're hardwired to it. I mean, it's why like the biblical traditions were always oral traditions before they were ever written down, and people always had these stories. Why were those stories so important to them? Because the stories were the foundation of how do they think through problems, and how do they know what's right and what's wrong, and how their society is going to function. It's the same way if we're talking about marketing or sales or whatnot, right? If we're going to have a podcast about it, what's really powerful is the story that's about that person going through the journey. And then we as listeners remember the story more than we'll remember anything else that's technical that happens. And when it starts happening to us, we're like, man, that's exactly like when that happened to Scott. I remember that story. And that's why I have Real Estate Nerds, because what I found is that a lot of the real estate investors that I had come across that were successful and had huge setbacks, it wasn't because of their technical knowledge of real estate investing. It was because of other things that were happening in their life, their mindset, where they at, how they were thinking, all these other aspects that I think that people were ignoring. And you can really only talk about those in a story context, because how boring is it if you just tell you the facts? You need to have a clear head before you go into a deal. Well, what the hell does that mean? You know, how do I know if I have that or not, you know?
How do you select your guests, Scott?
I try to find the smartest people I can and talk to them.
Oh, but you had me on the show.
Yeah, well, every now and again.
So there you have exceptions as well.
Yeah, I think maybe you don't do yourself enough justice, Adam, or this is some false modesty on your part.
Like I like to say, if I had a fault, which I don't, it would be my modesty.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, my philosophy in life has always been around like hang around the people that have what you want and hang around the smartest people you can find, And if I hang around with people that already have what I want, they can probably tell me how to get it too. And then also if they're really, really smart, then I'm going to know that they've thought about it a little bit more than the next guy. And that's probably going to get me there a little quicker.
And how do you use the content from the podcast? And this is a little bit of a lead in because I'd like to tell you what I do, but I'm interested to know, how do you use the content?
So what we do with our podcast, we'll put it through Zoom. That's where we do the recording. Most of all of our podcasts will also push to Facebook Live, and then also use and from Facebook Live, it automatically gets pushed into our YouTube channel. For the original.
So hang on a second, let me interrupt you. So you record the podcast and then you broadcast it on Facebook Live?
Yeah. So with Zoom, you can actually record the podcast simultaneously while you push it into Facebook Live. And then
you can't send out the recording on Facebook Live.
No, you have to do it simultaneously.
It has to be live.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So for years we didn't push to live because we said, hey, we don't want to do this one live. Let's just have a more relaxed conversation that we can really touch up and polish up, right?
Okay.
But typically that's how I would do it, to just keep it light. Say, hey, we'll give everybody a behind the scenes look at the podcasting by pushing it out to Facebook Live. That gives us some juice on Facebook. Then it gets automatically sent over to our YouTube channel to give us some juice on YouTube. And then if there's particular things that I'm talking about, or particular objections or particular new points I wanted to highlight from part of the conversation, wherever the conversation is going with the investors that we're having, then we'll take that podcast and we'll cut out snippets to just underscore some social credibility about saying like, hey, this isn't just Scott's opinion. Listen, this is the guest that he's had on. Like, you can hear them talk about the same thing about like why you shouldn't rely on insurance to protect you and why we should always have insurance, but how, insurance really is insufficient for what you really need for protection. And that's not just from Scott with a bias, like listen to like Rod Cleef and other guys talk about it.
That's really interesting. Do you do any articles from the transcripts of the podcasts that you put out?
Yeah, I thought to do that, but I'm wondering who the heck reads those, like maybe more people are reading them than I think, and maybe that's something we should do. But I got to tell you that marketing, you're really kind, Adam, to have me on a marketing show. I actually think my marketing is exceptionally weak on like how all the things that we should be doing. And I would love for somebody to come in that's a baller and just fix it all and do it all for us or whatnot, right? But that's a great thing I've heard people do, right? They'll take the show, they turn it into a transcript, make it into an article, put some headings into it, and now they have like an easy piece of like content, that comes into it. Is that what you're thinking?
Yes, exactly. That's actually, now you said you're not sure that anybody reads it, makes me wonder if it's worth my while too, because that's what I do with every single podcast. I take the transcript. It's what I do for my clients. Take the podcast, we transcribe it, then we have what we call thought leadership pieces that go out.
I'm a moron. I don't know what I'm doing on anything that comes into this realm, right? Because I only know what the stuff is that appeals to me. Like, I never read those articles from people or from because a lot of times actually they're not dense enough, but I'm a crazy nerd. And some people maybe like an easier read, and I'm a crazy nerd where I'm like, no, if I'm going to spend the time to actually read something, I got to have it as dense as possible. So I can just assimilate the information as quickly as I need to, because I don't really love reading. I do it as an ends to a mean, or means to an end, really. But probably a lot of people love it to have the transcripts. I see everybody doing it. I mean, it seems like one of those things that like, if everybody's doing it, then it's got to be right?
Yes, of course, right? That must be how it goes. But you also went with video instead of audio. Is that right? On the podcast, you chose to do that out of the gate?
We'll do that. We do both, actually. So we have an audio that we push through iTunes and Stitcher. And then we have video pieces that we'll push through the website as well as through Facebook Live and on YouTube.
Right. But every time you record, you're always recording video, and you did that from the outset.
Yeah. Yeah. Just for the few people that really like to see the video. And I've also found it really interesting with the Facebook, with pushing more things to Facebook, especially through Facebook Live. And I'm not a genius at this stuff, right? Like, I was talking to some guys that at Mr. Land Geek and whatnot. And they're like, oh, well, you'd cut up all of your videos into like a queue for Facebook. And then you get like all this juice out of reusing all the content. And I just thought it was cool that more and more people viewed me as an authority because they were friends of mine on Facebook or inside of a group, and they saw my video and saw that I was pushing out content. And like, that was enough. They're like, oh, that's cool. All right, well, it looks like he's doing some stuff. He must be pretty good. And I was like, wow, the bar for attorneys is really low.
Well, this is, look, you're quite right. You like, when you read something, you like to see something that's really dense and highly educational, something that's going to give you value from, the first sentence. My sense is that everybody is different, right? Some people, they want to read something that's more high level and then drill down. So that's why I like to create content, is to service really everybody out there. You never know who's consuming your content. And if you provide it to investors, in my case, or prospects in general, in every format, you're not going to lose somebody. Somebody that doesn't listen to an audio or doesn't watch a video might like to read. So I just like, because it's there anyway, and it's so easy to do, I see no lack of value. Plus, incidentally, it's also, as you know, really good for SEO if you get the right words in it. It helps.
I have no doubt. I think probably we're not having any type of a philosophical difference on what the right thing to do is.
Right.
It's more of just like where my attention has gone into, and also realizing that my company has grown from 4 people to 40, and now we're down to 25. And we've had these fluctuations in the last 2.5 years. So it takes a lot of my time and attention. Anytime something new comes up and I have to make another decision on it, I have to be really careful about what decisions I'm making there into it. So if I had somebody on my team that was like, hey, I got a great idea with how we can take stuff, we can repurpose it, we can shuffle it all around, snip it up, queue it up, whatnot, I'd be like, sweet, go with it, run with it, right. Do all of it. Because like the value of how much value that I'm able to give to people with all of the things that I do with my company are so strong that even like one customer, one new person a week coming through the door is going to pay for all of that extra effort that goes into it, right? And I'm not in the business of trying to make the most amount of money I can. I'm in the business of how many people can I help. So in a lot of ways, maybe I'm even doing a disservice to myself and to others by not committing more fully to all the different ways that I could pull people in.
What is your time commitment to non-legal work? In other words, to digital marketing or to content production? How much of your time does that take? I mean, it sounds like it's quite a big part.
Yeah, I would say that I probably spend about 20 hours a week right now, and looking at from all the aspects that go through it, right? Like, but we're also always evolving, right? So it's just a tricky thing, right? I could crunch my schedule down to 0 right now if I would just say, hey, I'm going to stop growing. I could push out content probably maybe 3-4 hours a week. If I really wanted to crunch it down, I'm into doing that. But I'm always trying to grow to the next level, maybe because I'm a little bit crazy, and to a lot of realms of trying to say, well, really what I really need to do is actually create like site maps, where I actually have like, here's a site map of how do you actually learn about a series LLC? How can I get somebody to a web page to have them fully educated that hasn't heard from the podcast? And how can we create webinar series that get people all the information within like 2.5 hours? Okay, what would that scripting have to look like? And all the aspects around that. So I'm probably always on like what's on the cutting edge of what can I develop with the business, more than I am on, hey, here's the other thing I've already built. Let's maximize out all of the pieces that you've already built, Scott. Because I'm always thinking of like, what's the next thing I could go build that's really going to take this whole thing to a new level. So I probably could save myself a lot of time and actually grow a lot faster if I had stronger people that could build out on all the things that we've already done.
So fair to say that content marketing or digital marketing is a pathway to growth?
I'd say for everybody out there, it's the cheapest and easiest way if you have good ideas. If you have good ideas, then push out content, share more, tell all the secrets, and get all your customers that way. And then you don't have to worry about advertising. Like there's 98% of the game you don't even have to worry about or think about. If you just do really great content and you spend your time actually having true insights for people.
Scott, apart from Facebook Live, which we did talk about that when we recorded the podcast, your podcast, yesterday, and that, when I think about that, gives me palpitations. The idea of being live anywhere, I'm not so keen on it. But how else do you use social, and what are the channels that you like to use, you find are the most effective?
Yeah, I don't really. We're just now getting into it, of like what social would look like and how would we use it for a business. We're just getting our first advertising funnels up. I mean, it's pretty disgusting, Adam, that like I've been allowed to be so lazy about like just coasting on article writing and podcasting and rapidly growing a law firm based off of just those two things, when there's so much else out there that we could and should be doing.
So when you say you're just starting on social, what is your process for figuring that out?
Well, I mean, it's usually my process for most things, right? So the first thing I do is actually talk to somebody that I think is a lot smarter than me. And then they convince me that they're a lot smarter than I am in something, and they've really actually done it before, to make it work. And I can buy into that vision. And I say, okay, cool. So we think, we think Facebook ads, right? It's going to be a cool thing for us. And we think ClickFunnels will be an interesting way of, bringing people in at like a higher level, and then using like a 6-month process to really being able to educate them enough to be able to see the value, right? And so from that point, what I do is I usually launch in and learn it all myself and once. I'll do everything once, or I try to do almost everything once. And then after that, I don't ever want to do it again. But I'll do it all once, and I'll crush whatever books that I need to crush to be able to have the content, to make sure that the guy that's doing it, I can hold him accountable, right? And I think like everybody, you know, typically there's probably few people in this world that don't need somebody else to hold them accountable. In fact, I would say I haven't met any. I haven't met anybody that's a really high-powered individual that doesn't have somebody else that helps them stay accountable, right? Into it at some level, right? And these guys at the highest level, they do it as part of their peer group. And that's why the guys that are $100 million billionaires, that's why they hang out with each other, because who the hell else do they have as your peer group to be able to hold you accountable to the things you need to be doing better, right? But so that's what I'll do. I go through, find somebody, they convince me of an idea. I say, great, I'll go learn how to do it all once. I crush whatever the top books are, usually the top 3 books, and whatever that relates to, whatever that's going to be. And then I usually give them like a 1-month test with like a budget. I say, okay, here's our budget that we all agree on. This is what you're going to do. This is the results that you said you can give. And then I'll give it a shot. And then if they can produce the results after the 1 month, then I know that they can actually walk the talk. And I'm actually knowledgeable enough to be able to see that they really did what they said they were going to do, and that it actually worked the way they said it was going to work. And if not, then I scrap the idea and I move to the next one.
That's interesting. Has anything worked particularly well for you?
No. I mean, it means particularly well, like compared to what, right? I mean, we do a few $1 million in business off of podcasting, right? Off of podcasting and article writing. So for me to say like, how well does something else need to work for me to be able to say like, is it working particularly great? I'm like, okay, yeah, it makes a 5% bump, you know, but like nothing else has been nearly as dramatic, being like, oh, once we figured out, you know, this Facebook Live game, everything changed for us. I mean, it was nothing like that.
Oh, I see. I see. Hey, Scott, I cannot believe we've been talking as long as we have already. It has just flown by. I could.
Oh, did it really?
Yeah, it's like we're already at 45 minutes. Unbelievable. So here's what I'd like to do. I would love to talk to you for a lot longer, but let me roll into my final 3 questions that I ask all of my guests. And these are what I call sign-off questions. Quick answers. So what's the most important thing that someone starting out syndicating a real estate online should keep in mind?
Are you talking about for the operator or for somebody?
Yes, operator.
As for an operator, I would say that I would try to have more authenticity inside of the deals that I'm bringing. So what I see a lot of times happening with operators now is I can get away with people that are just throwing money at deals. And so they have like these really aggressive operating agreements that they'll push out, right? And the thing I'm concerned about for those guys is that they're building a brand right now. Their brand is directly attached to them. And if things go sideways, they're going to have an online brand presence that's going to affect them after the crash, right? And so I'd be like, you might be able to make more money now, and maybe you have to take that kind of aggressive stance. I don't think you do, but maybe you have to be able to make money right now. But just be cognizant of the fact that the game with the internet as it's being played now, when you have personal branding that's personally attached to your particular name, that stuff is going to last you for a long time, and people don't forget.
That's a very, very profound insight. Second question. What has been the hardest lesson you've learned online?
The hardest lesson I learned online was to be okay with not having to be right. What I found is that there's some people out there that are really bent on being right, and what I had to do is be able to say, like, you know what, my job is actually just share the best information that I have and the best analysis I have, and then leave it up to everybody else to make a decision. But my job isn't to convince any particular person.
My last question. What are your key daily habits? You say you spend 20 hours to do content every week, or digital marketing. But what are your key daily habits that make you successful online?
Actually, it's probably running. I try to spend an hour on my legs each day, either running or biking. And I have my dog. She's Franny. She's a Labradoodle, 2 years old, super active. Happier she gets, usually the happier I am, because she's with me pretty much throughout the day, because I'm working from home or I'm working in the office and whatnot, right? And it's just great having your dog around. I didn't know I was a dog person, but
Nasha.
Do you have yours there?
I gotta introduce you to someone. Come here. Hello to Scott. Come on.
Oh,
You good boy.
Bear.
Boy, yeah, good boy.
Ah!
Okay, go back to sleep.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. Yeah.
That's Nasha.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. Yeah, and so running with Franny, right, and spending that hour becomes so important, because it's it's time that I actually spend in relation, right, to something, right? So that's a fulfilling piece of what we need. It's like a Homo sapien, right? The second thing is I'm active, and I'm active for over a 30-minute period. So then what that does, it kicks on all these other hormones and whatnot that go on in your brain that then allow me to have a much clearer head and clear energy state throughout the day, right? So working online, I think that, and working in front of a computer is probably one of the worst things we could do as human beings, right? I mean, it's really an aggressive, attacking things that we're supposed to be in nature and tribes, hunting deer, right? It's what are we doing? This isn't our natural environment. Yeah. So it's doing things like that where I'm outside, I'm in nature, I'm running, I'm with my dog, or I'm with other people and doing that kind of stuff that really just sets the energy state that I need for the day to build what I need to. Because if the energy state isn't right when I'm getting into work, I can almost guarantee that work day is going to be about half as effective as it would be otherwise.
Scott Royal Smith, a huge pleasure having you on. Thanks so very much for your time today.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. Great to be here.
That was Scott Royal Smith of Royal Legal Solutions. He's a great guy, right? And a totally natural digital marketer. I'm sure you learned a lot from Scott today. Remember, you can learn exactly what it is that he looks for in offering documents in any real estate investment by going to the podcast page for today's episode at gowercrowd.com and signing up for the webcast I put together for you there with Scott, Real Estate Investment Contracts, Reading Between the Lines. That's all at the show notes page for today's podcast at gowercrowd.com. Hey, thanks for listening. And thank you, Scott Smith at Royal Legal Solutions, for spending your time with us today. That's all for this episode. I'll see you next time around. And for now, this is Dr. Adam Gower signing off.